The spring wind blew dust through Cedar Falls streets. The air smelled of horse manure and burned wood. It was a hot, dry day when nothing moved unless it had to. People gathered in the town square. They came for livestock, tools, and something strange that day. Her name was Emma Rose. She was 22 years old, wearing a blue dress that was old and faded. Her hands were tight at her sides like she was holding back fear. Her father pushed her into the center of the square like she was for sale. "She can cook, sew, and stay quiet," he said. "Anyone with money can take her home tonight." The crowd didn't laugh out loud, but the quiet was worse. Women looked away. Children hid behind their mothers' skirts. Emma stood there with the sun burning her skin and shame burning worse inside. "She can't have babies," her father added. "Tried for years with her husband. Nothing happened. But she has good hands and all her teeth. That counts for something." Emma didn't beg. She had done that before when her husband threw her out after 2 years of trying for children. It hadn't helped then, so she stayed quiet. Near the back of the crowd, her mother stood with an old shawl around her shoulders. Her eyes looked at the ground. Her lips were pressed tight. She didn't speak or try to stop it. She just watched. When people started to leave, she left with them, keeping her head down like she had never come to watch her daughter be sold. A man stepped forward. He was broad-shouldered with a shirt dusty from travel. A wide hat cast shadow over most of his face. His coat smelled of horses and pine trees. He didn't ask her name. He didn't look her over like a buyer checking goods. He reached into his coat, pulled out a leather bag, and dropped coins on the table. No talking about price. No questions. Her father raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" he said. "She don't come with a money-back promise." The man didn't move. He didn't look at Emma. "She won't be judged anymore," he said. Then he turned and walked away. Emma didn't move. The crowd had already started to drift off. No one cared where she went now. Her father gave her one last push. "Go on. You're his now." She bent to pick up her small bag, just old shoes and a locket with her mother's picture inside. Then she followed the stranger into the dust. The wagon waited near the blacksmith's shop. 2 mules stood quiet as their owner. Emma climbed up beside the stranger without a word. She didn't know his name was Jack Stone yet. Jack handed her a dented water bottle. "Long ride," he said. The water tasted like metal and old wind. They rolled out past the edge of Cedar Falls where the prairie opened like a blank page. The sky went on forever. Fence posts leaned tired into the earth. No birds, just wind in the grass and the sound of leather creaking. He didn't speak again, and she didn't ask questions. Emma studied his face when his hat lifted just enough. He wasn't old, but the sun had marked his skin with lines. Maybe 35 years old. His hands rested loose on the reins. One had a scar across the knuckles. Another was wrapped with torn cloth. No wedding ring. "Why did you take me?" she asked, not expecting an answer. He didn't look over. "5 kids," he said. "No mother. No time." Her throat caught. "So I'm a governess?" "No," he said. "Just someone not cruel." "That's enough." By evening they reached a ranch tucked into the dry land. The house leaned slightly west like it was listening for something that never came. A weathered gray barn stood behind it. Chickens ran through the yard as the wagon pulled in. He stepped down, tied off the reins, and walked to the porch without asking if she'd follow. She did. The porch boards creaked under her weight. The front door wasn't really a door, just a thick quilt nailed to the frame to keep wind out. Inside, 5 faces looked up. 4 boys, 1 girl. All wide-eyed and red-cheeked. Each one holding still in the dim light. They had lost their mother to fever 2 winters back. Since then, the silence in that cabin had been louder than any storm. "This is Emma," Jack said. "She'll be staying." The youngest, Caleb, maybe 5, walked straight to him and wrapped both arms around his leg. Jack bent down, picked him up with one arm, and opened a door with the other. "Room's upstairs," he said to Emma. "Water's in the bucket. Still warm." She climbed the stairs slowly, her hand trailing the wall. The bedroom was small and plain. A wash basin, a narrow bed, a window looking out toward an open field lined with fence posts and dry grass. She set her bag down and sat on the edge of the bed. She didn't cry, not yet, but her hands shook in her lap. She stayed there listening to the sounds of strangers in a house that wasn't hers yet. Morning brought the smell of smoke, old coffee, and something burning in the pan. The cabin woke early. Footsteps on creaking boards. The sound of boots by the door. Soft talking broken by occasional coughs. Emma moved carefully. She didn't yet know who slept light, who spilled sugar, who liked their eggs hard or soft, if there were eggs at all. The children stayed quiet around her. Nathan, the oldest, watched her with folded arms and a look too old for his age. Thomas whispered to Daniel, who kept glancing at her like he was working out a problem. Rose, the only girl, sat near the fire and held tight to a scrap of fabric she wouldn't let go. Caleb, youngest of the 5, stayed nearby and copied everything she did in silence. She tried to cook. The beans turned to mush. The bread wouldn't rise. She spilled the coffee pot and burned her hand on the tin. Later she tried sewing a torn sock and stabbed her finger twice. The needle rolled under the stove. She said nothing. She just pressed her lips together and swept the floor until her shoulders hurt. That afternoon, while lifting a pot of stew from the stove, her grip slipped. The heavy pot crashed to the floor. Stew splattered across the boards. The sound scared the chickens outside. Inside, the children froze. Emma stood still, heart pounding, waiting for the yelling, waiting for the anger she had heard before. Then the front door opened. Jack stepped in. He looked down at the mess, then at her. Without a word, he bent down, picked up the pot, threw out what was left, and wiped the floor with a towel. "It's just stew," he said. That was it. He walked back outside. Emma stayed frozen for another minute, the cleaning rag still in her hand, the heat still rising in her throat. Except this time it wasn't shame. It was something quieter, something she didn't yet have a name for. That night, after the dishes were cleaned and the children had gone to their rooms, she sat on the porch with her hands in her lap. The night air was cool. Stars burned clean above the roofline. She tried not to cry. She failed. Later she walked from room to room. Rose had kicked off her blanket. Thomas talked in his sleep. Caleb was curled up with his hand in his mouth the way very young children do, still believing someone would carry them through the night. Rose stirred and made small sounds of pain. Her forehead felt warm, too warm. Emma stepped into the hall. Jack was already there. "She's burning with fever," she said. "I need willow bark, mint if you have it." He didn't ask questions. He turned, and within minutes she had everything she needed. She boiled water, crushed herbs, soaked cloth. She pressed the damp cloth to Rose's face, held the girl's small body, and hummed. She didn't stop, not when the child shivered, not when the fever got worse, not even when her own body sagged with tiredness. She stayed up all night. By morning, Rose opened her eyes and whispered in a scratchy voice, "Pancakes." Jack stood in the doorway. He didn't say anything, but the worry in his shoulders eased. His eyes stayed on Emma like he was seeing something he hadn't expected, something strong, something good. Emma didn't smile. She was too tired. But she didn't look away from his gaze either. She simply nodded and turned back to the girl who was already falling asleep again in her arms. The next morning when Emma came downstairs, steam rose from a kettle already warming on the stove. Next to it sat a tin cup and a piece of paper folded once. 2 words were written in stiff, uneven handwriting, "Thank you." No name, no signature, but it didn't need one. She held the note for a moment longer than she meant to. Then she sat down, wrapped her hands around the cup, and drank slowly. The tea was sharp, bitter with pine, but it warmed her chest like something solid. Through the window, the prairie stretched out, wind brushing through wild grass. She watched it in silence. Something in her, tired, tight, and long kept shut, began to shift. Later that day she was washing pots behind the cabin when Caleb came wandering up, his arms raised. "Mama," he said, bright and sure. She turned, startled. He wrapped his arms around her legs and grinned like he'd just named the moon. She didn't correct him. She bent down and pulled him close. For the first time in weeks, she smiled, not because someone expected her to, but because she wanted to. As spring settled into the bones of the land, the rhythm of the cabin began to change. Emma's hands found their steadiness again. Bread began to rise. Beans stayed whole. She made scarves from old feed sacks, one for each child. They wore them without asking why. She taught letters by candlelight, helped Daniel trace his name on a piece of wood, sang soft songs over simple soup bowls, braided Rose's hair into 2 clean ropes, tying them with blue ribbon found in an old trunk. She learned what each child feared. Nathan hated thunder. Thomas lied when he was embarrassed. Rose got quiet when she missed her mother. None of them asked her who she was. They watched what she did. They listened to how she stayed. The first time one of them said it, it came out like breathing. Thomas passed her a spoon and said, "Here, Mama." The room went still for a beat. He didn't take it back. Neither did she. The next day Daniel said it. Then Rose. Then Caleb, who had already decided she belonged to him. And that was that. She was Mama now. No ceremony, no announcement. Just the slow naming of what already was. That night Jack sat on the porch with a piece of wood in his lap, carving by lantern light. Emma walked past with a bundle of laundry in her arms. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked, eyes still on his hands. She paused. "I did," she said. "A while back." He nodded once. "Why didn't you?" Emma looked out at the dark fields where the swing sheet hung from the oak tree moved slowly in the breeze. "For the first time in my life," she said, "no one's asking me to be anything I'm not." The town of Millbrook sat low on the horizon, dry, sun-bleached, lined with shuttered windows and sharp eyes. Emma hadn't set foot there since the day her father sold her like livestock. One afternoon Jack hitched the wagon and paused at the step. "Need salt and nails," he said. "Come if you want." Emma climbed up without asking why. The road to town rolled quiet and open. Dust kicked up behind the mules. Jack kept one hand on the reins, the other resting on his thigh. His hat stayed low. His words were fewer than usual. In Millbrook, he went inside the general store. Emma waited on the porch, arms folded, eyes scanning the street. That's when she heard it. Well, if it ain't the Barren ghost come back to town." The voice cracked sharp across the square. Emma turned. Her former mother-in-law stood near the dry goods stall, fanning herself with a folded newspaper. Beside her, holding tight, stood the younger wife, lace gloves, red cheeks, and a hand resting too deliberately on a belly that hadn't yet rounded. "That's her," the girl asked, loud enough for half the market to hear. "Oh, that's her," the older woman said. "Pretty but cursed. Couldn't give us even one squealing baby." "I will," the girl said proudly. "A big healthy boy. He'll carry the family name. Not like her, useless as a cracked jar." Emma didn't answer. She stood still, jaw set, hands curling at her sides. She turned to leave. Then a shadow fell beside hers. Jack had stepped out of the store, a sack of salt in one arm. His eyes were slow to blink. He looked at the two women only once, then turned to Emma. "She's the one who gets Rose to sleep when her legs hurt," he said. "The one who taught Caleb not to throw rocks. The one who makes that house feel like it has a roof again." Neither woman spoke. They didn't need to. Jack nodded toward the wagon. "You ready?" Emma nodded back. They walked away together, leaving the words behind them like dust. That night Emma didn't speak of what happened. She tucked in the children, pulled quilts over bare shoulders, ran her hand over Daniel's hair as he slept. Later she stepped onto the porch alone, shawl wrapped around her. Jack followed. He stood next to her, watching the stars scatter across the sky. "You didn't have to say anything," she said. He kept his eyes ahead. "I didn't say it for them." The air was thick that night, still and close, like the land was holding its breath. The lantern inside the cabin flickered behind the curtain, and the world outside lay dark and dry. Emma stepped out with a bucket in hand. The sky stretched black above her, stars dull behind a thin veil of heat. She moved toward the well, bare feet silent on the dirt path. She didn't see him at first. He leaned against the fence post, half in shadow, shoulders hunched, hat tilted back. A bottle dangled loosely from his fingers. Wade Miller, the trapper from the next ridge. Drunk again. Well now, he called, voice slurred. Look what the wind carried in. Emma froze. Thought Jack kept you locked up tight, Wade said, pushing off the post. Guess not tight enough. It's late, Wade, she said. Go home. He stumbled closer, breath thick with whiskey. I remember when they sold you, he muttered. Figured you'd end up somewhere quiet. Didn't think Jack had that kind of taste. Emma backed a step. Don't come any closer. He grinned and kept walking. Come on now, he said, voice turning low. Just wanted to look. After all that talk, you owe us at least a smile. Then he reached out. His hand caught her wrist, dirty, rough, unwashed. Before she could scream, before she could twist away, the barn door slammed open behind them. Boot steps, fast and solid. Then Jack hit Wade clean across the jaw. One punch. The trapper hit the dirt like a felled tree, moaning as he curled into himself. Dust lifted around them. Jack stood over him, chest heaving, fist still tight, blood trailing from his knuckles. He didn't look at Wade. He turned to Emma. You all right? She nodded, but her breath came shallow. Her hand shook. I'm sorry, she whispered. She didn't even know why. Jack stepped forward. He untied the red cloth from his neck and gently took her hand, the one Wade had grabbed. He wrapped the cloth around her wrist, slow and careful. No one touches you, he said, voice low and steady. Not unless I say. Then he looked at his bleeding hand and shook his head. Damn fool, he muttered, not at her, not at Wade, but maybe at the world. Back inside, Emma boiled water and cleaned his knuckles in silence. The room smelled of soap and copper and smoke. You didn't have to do that, she said. Jack didn't move. He put his hand on you. You don't like fighting. I like it less when someone scares you. She stopped, pressing the cloth to his skin with a little more pressure. I cried, she said, voice catching. But not because I was scared. Jack looked up. Because no one's ever stood up for me like that. He didn't answer, but something passed in his eyes, something warm, unguarded, as if her words had settled deep in him. When she finished, he moved his fingers once, and she wrapped the cloth around them neatly. I don't want to live in a world, he said quietly, where a man like that thinks he can say those things to you. Or worse. Emma smiled faintly. Her wrist still hurt, but her heart did not. The morning was cold enough to turn breath visible. Emma was making biscuit dough in the kitchen when a scream shattered the quiet, high, sharp. One of the children. She dropped the bowl, flour flying into the air like snow, and ran barefoot out the door. Daniel lay near the woodpile, collapsed, his face twisted in pain. His leg was bent underneath him, and the old axe sat just inches away, its blade streaked red. Emma knelt beside him, already pressing her hands to his thigh. Oh God, she whispered. Jack came running, his face pale but his hands steady. He scooped the boy up without a word. Boil water. Bandages. Now. Emma ran, her heart pounding so hard she couldn't hear her own footsteps. She filled a pot and grabbed clean cloth from the cupboard. By the time she returned, Jack had cleared the kitchen table and laid Daniel across it. His pant leg had been cut away. Blood oozed from a jagged cut along his thigh. Emma pressed the cloth down. The boy cried out, teeth gritted, fist clenched. I know, baby, she said, her voice cracking. I know it hurts. Just hold on. She worked with shaking hands. Her tears dropped to the cloth as she wrapped the wound tight, knot after knot, press after press. Red soaked through the fabric, but the bleeding slowed. Jack stood nearby, silent, watching. Then Daniel blinked up at her, pale but awake. Don't cry, Mama, he whispered. She pressed her lips together, breathing in the name like a prayer. Mama, he said again. You make the best biscuits. Emma placed her hand on his cheek and bowed her head, the tears finally coming without shame. Later, when Daniel was resting with his leg propped and the others had gathered close around the fire, the children moved differently. Rose brought her a blanket. Caleb curled up against her side. Thomas handed her a carved wooden horse with a broken leg and said, "You can fix things. That means you're staying." Then Nathan, quietest of them all, looked up and asked, "So you staying?" Emma didn't answer with words. She only nodded. That was enough. They had already called her Mama, but now, for the first time, she said yes without speaking. Jack watched it all unfold from the other side of the room, his hands resting on his knees, his eyes fixed not on the fire but on her. That night, after the house had gone still, Jack stepped out onto the porch. Emma sat there already, arms folded tight, the sky full of stars that didn't blink. He stood beside her for a long time before he spoke. "I ain't much for talking. You know that." "You say enough," she replied. "When I put that money down in Cedar Falls, I figured maybe I was giving you a way out. That's all. I never thought I had a right to keep you." She turned toward him slowly. "I figured you'd leave once you had your footing." The land cracked open. The wind grew sharp. Corn curled brown on the stalk. Beans withered. The chickens stopped laying. Jack spoke less each day. He worked longer, came home with dirt in his eyes and nothing in his hands. The children stopped asking for more at supper. Emma listened to their stomachs growl through the walls at night. Still, she rose before dawn. She filled every basin and bucket with water from the deep well. She wrapped her hands in cloth and walked out to the dying garden. She dug the earth, dry as ash, hard as stone, but she broke it anyway, turned it over, made space where there had been none. Some of the ranch hands offered to help. She refused. This was hers. Each morning she watered. Each evening she checked the leaves. When they sagged, she sang old lullabies her mother never finished teaching her. The cabin grew quiet again, until the morning Jack didn't come back in from the field. She found him collapsed near the fence, breathing hard, skin flushed with heat. He waved her off. Just tired. But she felt the fever burning through him. That night Jack lay in bed, his breath rough. Emma wiped his face with cool cloths and spooned water between his lips. He talked in dreams, twitched beneath the covers. Then sometime near midnight, he turned toward her in his sleep and whispered, "Don't leave me." "Not you too." Emma leaned close, her voice low and steady. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. "Not when I'm needed." By morning the fever had broken. When Jack opened his eyes, she was still there, hair loose, face pale, hands cracked and raw from the hoe. "You look like hell," he said in a rough voice. She smiled. "You should see yourself." A few days later, the back door burst open. "Ma, come quick," Caleb shouted. She followed him to the garden, heart bracing for bad news. But there, tucked beneath a curling vine, a single red tomato hung on the stalk. Split on one side, imperfect, alive. Jack stepped up beside her. They stood in silence. "How?" he asked. Emma bent to touch the vine. Her hands trembled. "You taught me," she said. "Not everything worth keeping comes easy." Jack looked at her hands, blistered, brown with dirt, marked at the wrist with the red cloth she never returned. Without a word, he reached for them. He bent and kissed her hand, slow and deliberate, like she was something he owed an answer to. Emma didn't pull away. She looked up at him, dust and sweat on her cheeks and something soft in her chest unfurling like spring. He raised his eyes to hers. Then, without permission or apology, he kissed her. Not as a claim, not as a rescue, but as a man who had waited too long to say what he felt. She kissed him back. There was no music, no audience. Just the creak of the wind and the rustle of a garden that should have died and didn't. That night they sliced the tomato into 6 thin pieces. One for each child and one to share between them. They ate slow, like it was something sacred. When the children fell asleep, curled in quilts across the floor, Jack reached for her hand. "I don't have much left," he said. "The land's tired. My bones too." Emma turned to him. "Then you still have more than most," she said. "Because before you, I had a name no one wanted to speak. Now I have a garden that remembers my hands, children who call me home, and a man who lets me stay without asking me to be anything else." Jack touched her cheek with one thumb, rough as fence post bark. "You never needed rain," he whispered, "to grow something beautiful. They came in spring, not with dust on their boots like the rest, but with polished wagons, clean hats, and hands that hadn't held a shovel in years. 2 men. Government contractors. They brought papers, promises, and plans. There'll be a rail line, one said, spreading a map across the kitchen table. Cuts clean through this ridge. Elevations perfect. The company's prepared to offer good money for the land. Emma stood near the stove, arms crossed. Jack didn't move from the doorway. We're not looking to pressure you, the other added. But think of what this could mean for your children. A new house, a better school, real security. Jack's eyes didn't leave the window. Outside, the swing hung crooked from the oak. Beyond that, the garden rustled in a soft wind. The soil still bore the marks of Emma's hands. The carved bench sat beneath the pine where they had shared coffee and silence through hard seasons. He looked at none of them and saw all of it. No, he said. The men blinked. Sir, with all respect. Jack turned slowly, arms folded across his chest. I'm not selling. There's room to negotiate. You can turn your train, Jack said, or go through someone.